Good Friday, January 5th to you, Spartans. Happy end of the first week back from break. You can see the agenda today. Be reminded, if you have not yet checked in with me this week, please do so before the end of the day, either in the Zoom 140 to 225 or by email. But I only had a couple of people check in yesterday, so let's make sure to reach out if you haven't already done so. We're talking about the article you read yesterday, Investing in Place, which very much looks at a couple of things here. We go back to this concept of social control, how society more or less instills values and behaviors through its citizens. It very much takes up the issue of control theory. It very much takes up the issue of strain theory, a little bit of a review here today. And it very much takes up the issue of differential association theory. We'll talk about that. That's going to be new. When we're done reviewing the article, again, the article proposes several ways to reduce crime rates. None of them have to do with punishment or incarceration, which we've been talking about now for a couple of weeks. We've been talking about the prison industrial complex, and clearly it has not solved crime rates in this country. Crime and punishment do not, punishment and incarceration do not deter crime. So we're going to look at preemptively stopping crime from happening. When we're done with that, you obviously have your Unit 1 exam. The test is open today. It'll be open through next Tuesday. So you'll have 5 days between now and next Tuesday to take your exam. So you got a little bit of time to review your work, review the notes, perhaps complete any missing assignments, which there are many from many of you. You got a few days to get yourself in position here to take that exam. Next week on Tuesday, I'll leave the exam open. But next week on Tuesday, we're starting unit number 2, which is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We'll have a documentary to watch, and each day I'll be posting new information, more or less that goes along with the video that we're watching in installments throughout the next 2 weeks. So a few things to do. When we're done here, Unit 1 exam by next Tuesday. Any missing assignments? Try to get those taken care of before you take the exam. Let's talk about reducing violence. All right, the article proposes 4 potential solutions to preventing crime or reducing the rates at which crime occur. One is investing in place or investing in the environment. Talks about rehabilitating vacant houses, removing vacant houses or buildings. Talks about building public accommodations, parks, libraries, pools, playgrounds, fields, athletic fields, things for people in that society to do. The article alleges that there was a significant reduction in crime if a community was invested in. I would imagine at some point in your lifetime, you have walked past a trash can that was full, overflowing, if you will, and you may or may not have thrown something away. Your article of trash, which you put in the receptacle, may or may not have made it into the trash can. And I could probably guarantee that if that trash can was full and spilling over and your trash didn't make it into the receptacle, you probably didn't think twice about turning around, picking up your trash and putting it away. Or perhaps picking up the trash around the trash can and putting it inside the receptacle. Because what's the point? I would imagine you probably walked through the school hallways at some point in time in your existence, seeing trash on the floor, and would not think twice if you dropped something or your trash didn't make it into the trash can, because what's the point? There's trash everywhere. I would imagine you've maybe come across people who were defacing private property. Maybe they were tagging or putting up some sort of graffiti, and didn't think anything about it because stuff was already there. What's the point? Or think about this. Think about how you behave in your vehicle compared to how you behave in someone else's vehicle, probably your parents' vehicle. I would imagine most of you are probably driving older vehicles, vehicles with more experience, more miles, more run down, things are broken. You don't necessarily care if you get a dent. You don't necessarily care if you have trash on the floor of your car. Not necessarily all the time, but again, we're talking rules and exceptions. I would imagine if you're in a car that's very nice, very new, very clean, you make sure you don't leave trash behind. You make sure your shoes are clean when you get in. I would imagine you behave differently in your parents' car, which is probably newer or nicer, than you do in yours, which is probably older and is downright an absolute hoopty. What we're getting at here is something called the broken windows theory. The broken windows theory states that if a person walks past a vacant building with a broken window, there's a significantly higher chance that that person who walks past the vacant building with a broken window will do something else to wreck or destroy or add damage to that building. Maybe they pick up another rock and throw it through a different window pane. What's the point? What's the big deal? No one cares about this property. It's already got a broken window. What's the matter with another broken window? The theory states that if people are in rundown areas, if people are around unkept areas, then there is a greater chance that more deviant behavior will occur. We are a product of our environment. And in terms of sociology, we get into the differential association theory. People are a product of their environment. If they are exposed to crime, if they're exposed to poverty, if they grew up living without, if they grew up living with deviance, then there's a pretty good chance they're going to exhibit deviant behavior in the past or in the future, excuse me. What they're talking about in investing in neighborhoods and building up the environment, the physical structure, streetlights, roads, sidewalks, trash cans, parks, libraries. If it is nice, if it is upkept, if it is modernized, if it is utilized, then there is a reduced rate of crime. Just like when you are in a nice car versus your absolute trash wagon, you're going to behave differently. I think it cites the city of Philadelphia, reducing the vacant housing, fixing up neighborhoods, saw a 20-some% reduction in crime. We go into economic disadvantaged areas, communities that do not have a thriving or an established economy. We're talking about jobs. If there are jobs in a community, we see a reduction in crime. Why? Well, undoubtedly, a lack of economic opportunity is going to have a direct relation to crime. If people have jobs, if people have access to means of making money and being able to provide for themselves, there's less chance of them needing to commit a crime. We go back to sociology again. We talk about strain theory. Again, our society has a set of values. Our values more or less align with goals and objectives that we're supposed to obtain by a certain point in time. Our society, through those values and those objectives, lays out a course at which people are supposed to follow to meet those goals and satisfy our values. Jobs is something essential in the United States. You're supposed to have a job. You're supposed to work. You're supposed to make money. You're supposed to provide for yourselves. But if we live in a community that is run down, if we live in a community where there is no economy, there are no jobs available, again, we go back to what's the point? What's the point of valuing these objectives or these goals or valuing what our society determines to be important if regardless of no matter what, I can't get what I need. I can't do what I'm supposed to do. So the article again is looking at reducing the potentiality of crime. Make sure things are nice, make sure things are clean. Pretty good chance you're going to see a reduction of crime. Make sure people have jobs. Pretty good chance that you're going to see a reduction of crime. We go on. Social connections between neighbors. Again, very directly related to the last two. If people have the ability to have a good paying job that allows them to survive and provide for their family, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to be more connected to their community. Why? Because they're not going to be working all the time. They're not going to need to have 2, 3, 4 jobs. Or there's a pretty good chance that they're not going to be dependent on government assistance programs, which would undoubtedly cause them to feel ashamed cause them to feel bad, cause them to more or less try to hide from other people. The reason why community connectedness is important is because it would reduce the rates of crime. Let's be honest. If a person commits a crime, their number one objective is to not get caught. It's much harder to not be caught if everybody knows who you are and you know who everybody else is. It's literally the number one objective of committing a crime is to not get caught. Well, it's a lot easier to not get caught if nobody knows who you are. And it's a lot easier to not have anybody know who you are if you're not connected to your community. But these things all kind of build on one another. We go to the last one, the civic infrastructure. How do we make these changes? Regardless of whether or not it's improving, scroll back up here, regardless of whether or not it's investing in removing vacant houses, unused buildings, and building something that is more utilized by the community, or putting people in these vacant houses after modernizing them, or talking about increasing economic opportunity for these people, or building community connectiveness, there's something to be said about the infrastructure of how this is implemented. Who should be doing the implementation? Should it be coming from outside groups, whether it be the government or church groups or civic organizations that do not live within the community? Or should it be people who are from the community, have a stake in the community, have a reputation in the community? There's a lot of research that supports that any of these changes of investing in place, the infrastructure, the economic opportunities, the community connectedness, all have to come from within the community. And again, we go back to differential association. You are a product of your environment. Your experiences growing up, or even the experiences that you've been told of that other people have incurred, have an impact on you. You know, there's a story in South St. Paul about a community of Latino Americans who more or less were displaced, right? The region was prone to flooding every year down by Harriet Island. Guadalupe is the name that sticks out in my mind, but I can't speak to it for certain. But anyway, the point is, this group of people were displaced from their community that they had lived in for decades. They were displaced because the area flooded. That was first and foremost. It was not an area conducive to, supporting and habitation. The people were displaced. The city came in, rebuilt the area so it was above the floodplain, and more or less turned the area into a commercialized industrial zone, which benefited not the people that were living there, and it didn't allow for them to move back and live there and give them jobs. It benefited other people. The point of this little story is it kind of details the past experiences that this community had, and it was passed down from one generation to the next. I remember talking to a parent about this at one point in my career here, who remembered this happening to his grandparents. I mean, this is a couple of generations apart, but it led to a cause of distrust. It led to a cause of distrust of the city government of St. Paul. And even though this person even though the situation didn't happen to this person, and even though this person wasn't even alive for the situation to happen, that person still had distrust of city government. Which again reinforces what they're saying. Any sort of change that is going to occur, whether it's job opportunities, community connectedness, or cleaning up the area, has to happen from within, because there's going to be this distrust. Now, here's the problem with investing in place. And we can go back to the article and you could talk about a 20% reduction in crime, or 30% reduction in crime, or 22% reduction in crime. None of the reductions are 100%. And it makes it very difficult to sell to the taxpayer, because undoubtedly any sort of change to a community that is plagued by crime is going to cost a significant amount of money. Will it cost more than imprisonment and incarceration? Depends on how you look at the numbers. Nothing is 100% effective, but if you want to reduce the rates of crime happening, then you have to do something preventative, and incarceration is not the case. But again, we come back to the issue that we talked about at the beginning of this unit. Who wants to help bad people? Who wants to help criminals? There's that stereotype, that misconception that people have to get over. Why do we want to help people? Help those people. Two, we have to get over the concept of paying more in taxes. And most people don't like paying taxes. But it has shown an impact on reducing crime rates. But again, it's not 100%. You can see a reduction of crime, but as I've said before, people who are criminal are criminal. People who are going to break the law are going to break the law. There is no 100% guaranteed way to stop it from happening, which gets us back into that. Why are we going to help those people? Let's just lock them up, get them off the streets, give ourselves a peace of mind, and we'll just move on. It's a very difficult thing. But again, looking at sociology, again, a lot of these things come down to the concepts of social control. We control control's a bad expression. We more or less instill a set of behavior amongst our citizens through either internal control or external control. External control usually comes first. Again, elementary school, the tokens, the stickers, the smiley faces, right? You're rewarded for something, kind of starts the process. We eventually, through those rewards and attention for doing what you're supposed to do, will hopefully be internalized. So you have this internal motivation. But social control, right, isn't going to be successful unless everything else is met. We talk about control theory. It's a lot easier to manipulate people into doing what they're supposed to do if they're attached, committed, or involved, and they believe in it. We go back to the article here and look at it this way. If you're in a neighborhood that's run down, broken windows, empty houses, people are, doing smack in these vacant buildings. There's no parks. The streets aren't lit. The streets are dirty. The sidewalks aren't clear. There's trash everywhere. I could go on and on and on. It's going to be real easy for people to not be attached to the society, to the values and objectives that society have. They're not going to be committed. They're not going to believe in what is valued by the rest of society. It's also a perfect example of strain theory. We have these beliefs, but we have these values, but what's the purpose? That's not for me. I don't have an opportunity. You're going to see deviance in some way, shape, or form. Is it going to be theft and murder? Maybe not. But you're not going to have a group of people who are believing in what society tells you. And again, the same thing goes for economic opportunities, being able to having the opportunity to have a job, access to a good job. Are you going to believe in society? Are you going to be committed to society? If no matter what, there's no jobs in your neighborhood, right? Right back to strain theory. What's the purpose? I'm supposed to do these things. I've done these things, but I don't have access to a job, right? We are a product of our experience. Everything that we've gone through in life dictates how we act in the future. From something as insignificant as the speed you drive in your car, I can guarantee if your parents speed, there's a pretty good chance that you're speeding. If your parents get speeding tickets, pretty good chance that you're getting speeding tickets. If your parents smoke, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to dabble in smoking. If your parents drink, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to drink. There's a pretty good chance if your parents swear like absolute sailors, you're probably going to swear like absolute sailors. What the article gets at is if you want to minimize crime, then we got to look at why that crime is happening. Differential association says if you're surrounded by deviants, if you have a deviant who's a role model, and if deviance is witnessed and or learned at a young age, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to follow the same path. How can you minimize it? Make sure an area is nice. Make sure there are jobs. Make sure there is some semblance of a community in which people know each other. You can reduce the rates of crime from happening. Ooh, you got a test. Test today. Test needs to be done by next Tuesday. So if you've got some work missing, need to review. Let's do those things in the next 4 days and make sure our test is done by Tuesday next week. Tuesday next week, we start the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which will take us a couple of weeks to go through. Hope you're doing well. Enjoy your weekends. If you have questions about any missing assignments, let me know. And until I see you next week, go Spartans.